Our Asia correspondent Helen Smith, I'm delighted to say, joins us live from Beijing. Is the red carpet rolled out for a sort of glorious state visit or not?
Not quite, I think, is the answer to that. Look, the Chinese are very particular.
Do you know who the British Prime Minister is?
不知道 I'm sorry.
I don't know who is the current.
如果说国际政治舞台上谁最会演变脸，那非英国莫属。前脚还在配合美国围堵中国，后脚经济撑不住了，首相斯塔默就急匆匆地跑来北京求合作。没有什么比看着昔日的大英帝国如今像个受气的小媳妇一样更搞笑了。天空新闻的主持人第一时间问前线记者，咱们首相这次去能不能像人家法国马克龙那样享受高规格对待？结果前线记者一盆冷水浇的那是透心凉，很遗憾对待我们的反应还是差点意思。虽然他们不太满意，但说实话我认为我们已经做得很礼貌了。英国这几年在对华政策上的反复横跳，早已透支了信任。在这个讲究礼尚往来的东方大国，一个摇摆不定且脱欧后实力大减的英国，还想指望什么高规格的红毯待遇？我们来看天空新闻是如何报道的。
It's the first trip to China by a UK Prime Minister in 8 years. Now, he wants to try and push for more trade opportunities. He's also going along with a delegation of more than 50 representatives from British business, sports and culture to try and achieve that.
But the picture's complicated. A closer relationship with China could mean further strain on the relationship with the United States. And there's a lot to unpack. So let's bring in now our Asia correspondent Helen Smith, I'm delighted to say, joins us live from Beijing. Helen, very good morning to you. So just quickly on the logistics, when does he arrive and what's on the agenda? And what's the sort of reception for him like there, Helen? Is the red carpet rolled out for a sort of glorious state visit or not?
Not quite, I think, is the answer to that. Look, the Chinese are very particular. They have a close eye on protocol. So there's no scenario in which he won't be treated with the respect that would be considered due to a visiting foreign leader. All the staging will be meticulously planned, and that's important. But when a visiting leader comes from a country that's seen as perhaps just a little higher in the pecking order, if you like, there is often more rolled out than I think we're expecting to see here. For the sort of really in favour leaders, if you like, sometimes you have these sort of troop inspections. So I think he'll be treated within the context of the fact that a British leader hasn't been here for the last 8 years, that frankly over the last decade the UK's really flip-flopped a bit on its China policy. It's been relatively inconsistent, and in recent years there's been hardly any engagement at all. To put that in contrast to some of our European counterparts, Macron's been here a number of times in the post-COVID years. The Germans have been here a number of times. We are frankly seen as a nation that is A, slightly closer to the US than others, and B, having just not made the efforts, not made the sort of overtures of some of our counterparts. And also, we're seen as a nation that perhaps is just a smaller player than some of those others. Post-Brexit in particular, Brexit, a decision that just confuses the Chinese, frankly. So in that context, look, the Chinese are pleased, I think, that the British leader is coming, but it will all be treated relatively, I think.
It's interesting to hear the sort of brutal reality there, I think, of how we're viewed on the world stage.
But I think in terms of the two sort of leaders meeting, I think that's sort of old news. We've sorted that issue. Now let's move forward. Let's talk about the things that will mutually benefit us, whether that's trade, whether that's investments, whether that's areas we can cooperate on. Both of them will have things they will want to bring up in the room that are slightly thornier. Starmer potentially want to talk about the war in Ukraine.
And just quickly, finally, Helen, I mean, clearly trade is the big focus, and we'll watch what announcements come out of that, and if there's any big surprises.
如果说中国官方层面接待的还算客气，那民间层面的反应简直就是杀人诛心了。这位英国记者同时还特地跑到了中国一个完全模仿英伦风情的小镇泰晤士小镇，试图寻找一点英中友好的心理安慰。结果呢，当他满怀期待地问中国路人，你知道英国首相是谁吗？得到的答案简直让人笑掉大牙。有人摇头，有人说只认识特朗普。最扎心的是一位大妈直接回答，是马克龙吧。这一刻，大英帝国的颜面扫地。原来在今天的中国老百姓眼里，英国的存在甚至还不如法国。让我们来看看这个尴尬时刻。
As a Brit, this might be the strangest place in China. It's been built to exactly emulate a British town, although now it's a little deserted and dilapidated. But is this a good metaphor for UK-China relations? This place is slightly odd. It's a little bit like being in West London, but there is a serious point to all this. This place was built in the 2000s, a time when China was getting richer and opening up, a time where all things British were considered desirable, and a time when there was real promise in the relationship. But things have changed since then. China's become more self-sufficient and more wary of the West. And the UK has spent 10 years flip-flopping on its China policy. Previous governments had very little engagement at all. But in reality, both are hedging a bit because their bigger trade partner, the US, has been a little unreliable of late. So what does China make of it all?
Do you know who the British Prime Minister is?
哎呀，不知道。I'm sorry.
他说马克龙，
Macron? No, Macron. 他是法国的。对。
I don't know who is the current, because actually in our mind about the West only has one name, is Donald Trump.
The reality is the UK is not considered to be that big a player. It's seen as being closer to the US and having not made the effort that other European nations have. Be in no doubt, this is a moment of huge opportunity for China.
面子丢光了不要紧，那咱就谈里子吧。可惜连盟友德国都看不下去了。在德国之声的最新一期节目里，他们简直是把英国首相的老底给揭穿了。主持人发出了一个灵魂拷问：斯塔默这次来到底能拿什么跟中国谈？要钱没钱，英国经济一团糟；要货没货，工业基础早就空心化了；要硬气没硬气，还得看美国脸色行事。在德国媒体眼里，英国现在就是一个想空手套白狼的落魄贵族，既想要中国的市场救命，又拿不出任何有价值的筹码，还不如他们德国呢。不得不说，日不落大英帝国真的是日落西山了。
And for more on this, I'm joined by Clifford Coonan in the studio from DW Business. He is a long-time China correspondent. Good to see you, Cliff. So this is the first visit by a British Prime Minister since 2018. Tell us, first of all, what Starmer's priorities are on this trip.
Well, he needs to boost trade with China. He needs to get more investment from China. The UK economy is struggling, and it's struggling in many ways. It's looking for partners, and China is there. We've had a lot of meetings with Macron. The French President Macron has been there. Friedrich Merz is going there next month from Germany, the German Chancellor. So he's the latest in a string of leaders. And at the moment, there's a lot of people looking for a reset in their China relations because they're unsure about relations with the US because they're become a lot less stable than they were under previous administrations. And so that's his main priorities are to do this. And he also has some sort of housekeeping matters to do. They've just opened a huge Chinese embassy in London, which has been heavily criticized. That's right, it's been heavily criticized. The British embassy in Beijing is pretty small, and I think he's looking for embassy reciprocity, that he gets a similar sized embassy there as well. So he's got a busy schedule.
And let's talk about trade, because China sold more goods overseas last year than it imported, in fact, more than $1 trillion more. That's a lot of money. What does the UK then have to offer China?
Well, this is the big question. I mean, there are a couple of things. Big companies like HSBC are there, which is a British company. Airbus, which makes its aircraft engines, is also trying to sell. They're also in the delegation. You've got 60 business leaders there. But a lot of them are representing bigger companies. And the problem is that China is exporting so much because its goods are cheaper. And a lot of countries are now anxious that their industrial bases could be destroyed by cheap Chinese goods flooding in. And the UK, which has already seen quite a lot of damage to its industrial bases, a lot of what it's offering now is services, but it's in a weakened position. So the question is, what does the UK have to offer when clearly China is much more focused on what it can send out than what Britain can offer it in return?
I wanted to ask you about whether there is a contradiction in the fact that the UK is seeking closer ties with China, with Beijing. At the same time, it is committing to closer ties to the AUKUS Security Pact. Now, that is designed to counter China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. Is one going against the other?
It is in some ways, because China doesn't like these security pacts, particularly with the UK and the US being out of what it considers its sphere of influence in the Indo-Pacific. Britain, for example, is supplying nuclear submarines to Australia, and it's also they have got quite strong security links. At the same time, other countries within the AUKUS group, so Australia, UK and the US, are also building ties. Australia's is also looking for a reset of ties with China at the moment. So in some ways, security has kind of taken a back seat. So where this is going to get interesting is at what point will the US say that these trade will have to take a backseat to security. But then again, the US is also kind of playing a double game. It hasn't imposed these tariffs on China, but Trump and how he wants to have excellent relations with China. So basically confusion reigns as far as security in the Indo-Pacific region is concerned, and the UK's role in that.
What about, dare I mention, human rights? Are they going to be brought up at this meeting at all, or will Starmer turn a blind eye?
I mean, it used to be that every time a Western leader went to China, this would be the first question, and now it's just gone so far down the agenda. And there's a lot of people asking, will Starmer try and intervene? Starmer has said he'll be clear-eyed about the UK's role on this issue, and he's promised to keep this in mind. But at the same time, I just think with all of these leaders arriving in China now, human rights just doesn't seem that high on the agenda anymore.
我们透过这3个充满戏剧性的片段，看到一个令英国人感到刺痛的真相。那个曾经号称日不落的庞大帝国，如今终于在东方的这面镜子里，照出了自己日薄西山的真实窘态。这次外交访问更像是一场大型的缺妹现场。当英国媒体还在纠结红毯够不够长、规格够不够高这种面子工程时，现实却给了他们最冷酷的耳光。斯坦默首相以为自己是来重启关系的棋手，殊不知在今天的国际棋盘上，脱欧后自我边缘化，经济上依附于人，战略上又不得不看美国脸色的英国，早已沦为了一枚无足轻重的弃子。那个在泰晤士小镇的街访，看似好笑，实则残酷。它证明了，在中国普通百姓的认知里，西方世界的权力版图已经重构，只有美国是对手，欧洲或许还有法国和德国，而英国甚至连让路人记住名字的资格都快没有了。这种无视比当面的对抗更让一个老牌帝国感到窒息。更讽刺的是，连德国人都看明白了这场戏的荒诞之处。你英国既想端着西方价值观的架子去教训中国，又想跪着求中国的市场来拯救那糟糕的经济数据。这种精神分裂式的外交，在拥有绝对产业链优势和广阔市场的中国面前，显得既幼稚又可笑。斯坦默首相两手空空而来，除了带一肚子既要又要的算盘，他甚至拿不出任何一个能让中国感兴趣的筹码。历史的车轮滚滚向前，不会因为谁曾经扩过就停下等待。这次访问，与其说是英国的外交破局，不如说是英国对自己二流国家身份的一次被动确认。当斯坦默站在北京的红墙之下时，他应该明白，那个靠长枪大炮就能敲开国门，靠一个所谓贵族头衔就能换取尊重的时代，已经彻底终结了。对于现在的英国，我们不需要愤怒，只需要保持礼貌的微笑，然后静静地看着他们在帝国黄昏的余晖中演完这出无人喝彩的独角戏。毕竟对于一个正在升起的太阳来说，谁会在意那颗正在沉没的夕阳呢？